So tonight we're continuing in Musil Shashar about Midos. Then we're up to the third Midah, which is Kina. We spoke so far about Gaiva and Kas, which was...
Hi, I'm Rod Bryant with the Torah Learning Channel. I want to thank you for making the Torah Learning Channel a great success. Your downloads and sharing the Torah Learning Channel with your friends and family members has really caused us to soar in our viewership. From all over the world, people are going to TorahLearningChannel.com to view our content. 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, some of the best English Torah teachers in the world, all Orthodox rabbis who have committed, over 100 have committed to be on the Torah Learning Channel. We want you to encourage your friends to make this a part of their weekly learning. You can sit for hours and watch some of the best lectures available all in one place. You don't have to go all over the internet to find these great rabbis. So, I want to encourage you to continue to support the Torah Learning Channel as you have. We want this service to be free, but it also takes finances to continue to operate this programming and to be able to make it a great success. So take time to donate today to the Torah Learning Channel, and also we want to thank Beyond the Matrix for allowing us to be a sponsor on Israel News Talk Radio of Beyond the Matrix Talk Show. So the next time that you are watching a session on the Torah Learning Channel that really strikes your neshama, your soul, please share it with your friends and your family and make Torah Learning Channel the #1 choice for you to go to for your weekly Torah learning. Until next time, shalom.
Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, Shabbos Daf Tzadik Dalet. We're at the Mishnah on Tzadik Gimel Amud Beis, 6 lines from the bottom. It says the Mishnah, HaMoitzi Oichen, Pachos Mikashir Bekli. If one should carry out food less than the shear, less than the prescribed amount, which is a gergeres, a dried fig. So if he takes out food which contains less volume than a dried fig, and he takes it out in a kli, says the Mishnah, not only is he potter for the food since it has less than a shear, potter af ala kli, he's also potter for carrying out the container. Why? Says the Mishnah, sha'akli tfeilolei, because the container is secondary to the content. We don't view the container as a separate entity, as though he's carrying it out separately. It is together, it is a combined masa yitzah on the content and the kli. And since the kli is merely there to protect, to contain the content within, it is secondary to the content. It is tafel. And if he's potter for the content, for the oichel, he's going to be potter for the kli as well. Continues the Mishnah, a similar halacha. That's a chayv mita. If one carries out a living person in a bed, potter afalamita. Not only is he potter for carrying out the living person, as Rashi will explain, because Chaim says atzma, because he lightens himself. Rashi will explain. So not only is he potter for carrying out this living person, he's also potter on the bed. Why? For the same reason. Potter afalamita shamita tfeilolai, because the bed is secondary and subordinate to the person within, and is not reckoned as a separate ma'aseh yitzah, so it's merely a tafel to the primary object here, which is the person. If he's potter for the person, he's potter on the bed as well. Continues the Mishnah, es hameis b'mita. What if he carries out a corpse, a dead person in a bed? Chayav, he is chayav because he intends on removing the tumah from his rishus. It's considered to be a chashav, a significant act of carrying, and therefore he's chayiv. Not only an entire mace, even a small portion, a kazayis volume of a mace, which has the ability to be matame, and therefore that is also considered to be a hitzah chashuva, and he is chayiv. And not only that, because a vela of a dead animal, a small portion of a sheretz, the size of a lentil, for instance of a dead lizard, chayav, because he is ridding himself of this tumah, and therefore it's considered to be a hitzah chashuva, as Rashi says. So this is the shita of Tanakama. Rabbi Shimon says, if he removes tumah from his domain, he's not chayiv, because he doesn't need this object out there in Shisarabim. His intention is merely to get rid of this tumah. That is considered to be a melacha. she'ena tzricha legufa. It's not needed for its own sake. It's merely done he's doing it as a means to get rid of this tumah. It's not serving a positive objective. And therefore, according to Reb Shimon, he's going to be potter. Let's take a look at Rashi inside. From the beginning of the Mishnah, which is 19 lines from the bottom up in Rashi. Begins Rashi as a chay b'mita. V'chay loy mechayev ala tzosei. So if one carries out a living person in the bed, he is potter on the person and on the bed. Why? Says Rashi, v'chay loy mechayev ala tzosei. One is not liable for carrying out a living person, because he lightens himself. That is the nature of things. The person, when being carried, lightens himself somewhat, and somewhat carries himself. And therefore, that is not regarded as a standard, as a typical load, and therefore, there's no chiyuv on carrying out this living person. Continues Rashi, v'chein kazayis min hameis chayev im hoitzi. Why? The hoyel umetame, since this kazayis has the ability to transfer tumah, hoitzo chashuvi, it's a significant act of carrying lahatz asur min tumah, to protect oneself, to save oneself from tumah. Reb Shimon point, afilu b'meis sholim, even when carrying an entire mace, davim malacha she'ena tzricha legufa. It's not needed for its own sake. He's carrying it out not because he needs it elsewhere, because he doesn't want it here. V'chol malacha she'ena tzricha legufa ella l'salka ma'alav, to get rid of it. Have a malacha she'ena tzricha legufa. Why? If it was up to him, he would never have had this thing here. He didn't need it. Shimon holds this is not included in the term melechas machsheves. Melechas machsheves means doing an act of a malacha, of crafting something, designing something, doing something positive. But doing a malacha simply for the sake of avoiding a problem, removing an issue, getting rid of a tumah, that's not considered to be melechas machsheves, and therefore he is potter. So in summary, we have two concepts learned in our Mishnah. First thing regarding Ikar and Tafel, and then we went on to the halacha of removing tumah, which according to the Tanakhama is considered to be a malacha. According to Reb Shimon, it is not. Continues the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan, we listen to Bryce. Hamoitzi oichlan kashir. What if one carries out oichlan, which contain the proper volume, and it is in a kli, im bekli, so if it's in a container, says the Bryce, chayav al oichlan, or pater al kli. He's chayav for carrying out the food, but he's potter on the kli because the kli is tafel. Once again, it is secondary, subordinate to the content. There's no separate chiv on the kli. However, says the Brisa, v'im hoya kli tzarich. What if he especially needed this kli out there in Shisarabim? Chayav af ala kli. Then indeed he's chayav twice on the oichlan and on the kli. Says the Mosh Mamina. Apparently. Apparently, we learn from here, just as you just told me, that if one repeats the same malacha of Eitzah taking place twice, one on the Oichlan, one on the Kli, will result in two chiyuvim, even though they both took place in one helim, in one lapse of awareness. He didn't become aware of his malacha until he completed both of them. He's chayiv two karbanos. Apparently, in the case where a person is oichel shnei zeisei chela, a person eats two kazesim of chela, forbidden fats, be'elam echad, in one lapse of awareness. Chayiv shtayim, he is chayiv two karbanos. And we know that that's not the case. When a person repeats the same avera, same sin twice, in one helam, he's only chayiv once. Says the Gemara, Amrav Sheshes, Hochab Ma'askina was speaking about when he took out the food, he was shaygig. It was done inadvertently. But regarding the kli, it was done intentionally. He knew that it was a malacha. So therefore, when the Brisa tells us he's chayiv on the oichlan, it's referring to a chayiv chatos due to the shaygig involved. When the Brisa tells us he's chayiv on the kli, the Brisa is referring to skila. Chayiv means a capital punishment due to the malacha b'mezid. So indeed, of course, there will never be two chatois on a malacha which was repeated behelam echad. We're speaking about a chatas and misa. Maskef Ravashi. How could you say that is the interpretation of the Brisa? V'ha afal klikatoni. The Brisa uses words which seem to be implying that he's bringing 2 chatois, not only on the oichlin, on the kli, on the container as well, he will bring a chatos. It seems like we're speaking about the same liability, the same chiyuv. You can't say one is a carbon, one is a misa. El Amar Vashi. We're speaking about, for instance, kigon sheshogag bezeh bezeh. Indeed, it was inadvertent on both accounts, on the food and on the utensil. However, he became aware of one of them, so he did them both together. Then he had a idea, a knowledge, an awareness on one of those 2 things. And then only afterwards, afterwards, he became aware of the second thing as well. And we know that Rabbi Yochanan holds, we learned this earlier in the Ayin Aleph, that Yediyos Machalkos, the fact that he became aware of one Avera before the other one, that splits them into 2 and requires 2 separate karbonis. Ubeplukta, this discussion here indeed is dependent on the machlekes, the Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Lakish, which Rabbi Yochanan is the one who holds that Yediyos are Machalkos, Mishum Lakish holds Yediyos are not Machalkos. So, this discussion between Rav Ashi, who tells us that the interpretation of the Brisa is based on this concept of Yediyos Machalkos, and Rav Sheshes, who avoided this approach, is apparently dependent on that machlekes, meaning that Rav Sheshes doesn't subscribe to that shita of Yediyos Machalkos, therefore he opted to avoid that interpretation. However, Rav Ashi does hold of that shita of Yediyos Machalkos, and therefore he interpreted the Brisa accordingly. So in summary, if one is moitzi, oichlin, pachas mikashir, in a kli, the Mishnah tells us he's pater on the oichlin and pater on the kli. The Brisa continues and tells us that if he is moitzi, oichlin, kishir, in a kli, he's chayav on the oichlin, and pater on the kli. What if he needs the kli? He's tzarech. The Brisa says he's chayav. We have 2 interpretations. Either we're speaking about that he was amazing on the kli, and he's chayav skila, or, according to Rav Ashi, he had a yediyah on one of the 2 things, on either the oichlin or the kli, and then afterwards had another yediyah on the second item, yediyah on machalkos. It splits things into 2, and it needs to be a separate carbon for each one. Continues the Gemara. As a chay b'mita, what if one carries out a living person in a bed, patur afal mita? Not only is he patur on the chay, he's also patur on the mita, because the mita is a tafel. Says the Gemara, leima masnis and Rabbi Nosson ivla Rabbanan. Should we suggest that our Mishnah is following Rabbi Nosson's shita and not the Rabbanon? It is Rabbi Nosson who says that a chay is not considered to be a mas, a load. The Sani is willing to the price. Hamoitzi behema chayav lishas rabim. If one carries out a behema, domestic animal chayav oif, a fowl lishas rabim, bein chayim bein shchutin, whether alive or whether slaughtered, chayav is considered to be a load. Rabbi Nosson Omer al shchutin chayav. I agree. If it is shachat, he is chayav. It's considered to be a load. However, ba'al chayim, if they are alive, pater shachai noiseis atzmai, because a living creature, a living thing, carries itself. It lightens itself. So Tosfos discusses the source of chai noiseis atzmai. So the point here is not the fact that it's light as opposed to being heavy. The point is that the living thing lightens its load. It's not your typical load, which is dead weight. Something which is alive, it lightens itself. It lifts itself slightly. Therefore, says Tosfos, it's not typical. It's not similar to the loads carried in the Mishkan, in the Midbar, and therefore, it doesn't have the status of a standard load, and there's no chiv. So this again is Shitas Rav Nosson, who tells us that if one carries a behemah chay v'oif, which are still living, he's pater. Apparently, says the Gemara, our Mishnah is following Rav Nosson, and not the Rabbanon, who don't seem to hold this svara. Amar Rava, afilu teim Rabbanon. Our Mishnah could be following even the Rabbanon. Ad kan leplig Rabbanon, olei the Rav Nosson. Rabbanon only disagreeing with Rav Nosson, ela bebehema chayav v'oif. By these creatures, the misharbetin afshayu, because the Rabbanon hold they actually make themselves heavy. They struggle, try to get away from the person, so they weigh themselves down. You can't apply the concept of chai noiseis atzmai, that a living thing lifts himself and carries himself. Quite the contrary, they weigh themselves down. Aval adam chai, but a living person the noises asmoi, who certainly lightens himself, he lifts himself slightly, I feel the Rabbanan moidu. Even the Rabbanan will agree that there is no chiv of eitzah because chai noises asmoi. So indeed, our Mishnah is discussing a living person, where even the Rabbanan agree that there's no chiv because the living person lightens himself, lightens the load somewhat, and is not considered to be a standard masoi, and there's no chiv. Omalei Rav Ada bar Ava l'Rav. V'hadasnan. Now let's take a look at the following Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Avodah Zarah, telling us that one may not sell any animals which are meant for labor, for doing malacha. You can't sell to a non-Jew. The Gemara tells us there's this concern of she'ela schirus, because perhaps he might lend it to the guy, loan it to the guy, and he might use it on Shabbos, and we know that a person is obligated, he has a chiyuv to have his animals rest from labor on Shabbos as well. Says the Mishnah, B'mesera mater b'sus. B'mesera allows a person to sell a horse. Why? V'tani, we looked in the Brisa. B'mesera mater b'sus. Why? Mipnei shu oisu b'melacha. Shein chayav n'olav chatas. Because a horse is designated for accommodating a rider. Now, a rider is not considered to be a true malacha. As Rashi says, it's not a malacha d'oraisa, and therefore, it's not considered to be one of those things that a person needs to ensure that his animal rests from. And therefore, B'mesera says that a person can sell a sus, a horse, to a guy, because the work that a horse is involved in is not a malacha. It's not a malacha shechayav n'olav chatas. So that's the shita of B'mesera. Now let's take a look further. V'amar Rav Yochanan, B'mesera, so this opinion of B'mesera, who exempts a sus from the prohibition of selling a behema to a guy, B'mesera Reb Nosson, Amar davar echad. They both are one and the same. B'mesera's reason and Reb Nosson's reasoning are alike. They're both aligned with each other. B'mesera, we just said that the horse is not performing a malacha by accommodating its rider, and Reb Nosson, who holds as well that a person, a chai, is noises atzmoi. He's not considered to be a load. Now, the amris, deloi pligi rabbanon olei de Reb Nosson. Now, if you maintain that this was Rava who told us that rabbanon agree when it comes to a living person, it's not considered to be a load. He is noises atzmoi. So the Gemara is challenging Rava. The Amos. Now, if you say the loy pligi Rabban olei de Rav Nosson elo bebehema chayav oif, if you maintain that Rabban only disagrees with Rav Nosson in a particular area when it comes to behema to chayav oif, because because they weigh themselves down, they struggle to get away and they weigh themselves down. However, a person, by a person, we certainly apply the concept, the formula of chayin. It says atzmoi, and this horse that is accommodating his rider, it's not considered to be carrying the rider. It's not really a masli. It's not really a load, even according to the Rabbanan, because chayin says atzmai. Says the Gemara, if so, my area b'mesera Reb Nosson. So why did the Gemara have to pair together the b'mesera who exempts a horse, since it's merely intended to for accommodating a rider, where there's no issa deraisa involved, there's no malacha deraisa, because he's not a masli. He's not carrying a load. Why did you have to pair together b'mesera Reb Nosson? My iri b'mesera Reb Nosson. And you align both of them together. You said, well, b'mesera and Reb Nosson are aligned with each other. They both subscribe to this chiddush that a person is not considered to be a load. For Amris, but haven't you said, I feel the Rabbanan moidu? Even the Rabbanan agree, they can see that when it comes to a person, we apply the rule of chayin says atzmai. So even the Rabbanan would agree that a horse is not involved in malacha because he's merely accommodating a rider, which is a person. Says the Gemara, Ki amar Rabbi Yochanan. Indeed, you're right. If a horse is accommodating a person who's riding on top of it, he's not doing a malacha. Why then did Rabbi Yochanan need to pair together b'mesera, who exempts a horse, and Rabbi Nosson specifically, as opposed to the Rabbanan? Because we're speaking about a very specific type of horse. Ki amar Rabbi Yochanan b'sus hamiyuchad la'oifos, a sus which is designated for carrying fowl, birds. And when it comes to birds, according to Rabbanan, at least, we don't apply the concept of Chai Noises Atzmai, which is specific only to a human being. Says the Gemara, is there such a phenomenon of a horse, which is especially designated for carrying oifos? Says Gemara, yes. We have this horse which is used by the Bei Vayadon. Rashi says these are the Tzayadi oifos, those bird trappers who would carry some of these wild bird nates and these type of birds who are these hunting birds which help them in their hunting. So indeed, Rabbi Yochanan, when he pairs together Ben Meseira with Rabbi Nassan specifically, he's referring to a horse, even a horse which is designated for carrying oifos. And in that case, certainly the Rabbanan disagree. They hold that it's considered to be a load. It's only a human being riding on a horse where we apply the concept of Chai Noises Atzmai. He's not considered to be a load. But if there's anything other than a human being on this horse, it's considered to be a load. So therefore, when Ben Meseira is matir b'sus, he allows all types of horses to be sold to a guy. Even this horse, which is designated for the oifos, to ride on it. Apparently, he's following Rabbi Nassan Shita, who maintains that even when it comes to other creatures, we apply the concept of Chai Noises Atzmai, and therefore this horse is not performing any malacha because the creature above it is not a load. And therefore he maintains one may sell it to a guy. Continues the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, U'mayde Rab Nassan b'kafas. Rab Nassan will agree that when it comes to something which is tied up, we don't apply the concept of Chai Noises Atzmai. Something which is tied up doesn't have the ability to even lift himself slightly to lighten the load, and therefore we treat it as a ordinary standard load, and if one should carry it out, he's chayiv. And Tosfos says actually even a tinik ben yomi, a one-day-old baby, would fall into this category. Other Rishonim say even up to 8 days old. Others say even if he's as long as he's not old enough to be able to walk through even by holding and assisting him, he doesn't have the ability to walk at all. It falls into this category of kafas. Apparently, up to that point, he doesn't have the ability to lighten himself and to be noises atzmai. So Rab Nassan will agree in this specific case. Amalei, Rab Ada bar Masna Abaye. V'ha hani parsoi, the commander kefisi dami. Now, these Persians, Rashi says, were wrapped up in bgadim rechavim, wide garments. They're finicky. They conduct themselves with heaviness and slow-moving people. So these people, says the Gemara, if they're sitting on a horse, we should give them the status of a kafas, of somebody who's tied up, who doesn't have the ability to lift himself and lighten himself. Once again, v'ani parsei, these Persians, the commander kefisi dami, they can be regarded as though they're tied up. Nevertheless, v'amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Meseira, Reb Nassan, let's go back to the equation that Rabbi Yochanan presented for us, that Ben Meseira, who allows selling any type of horse to a guy without any concern of malacha being performed with that horse on Shabbos, because a horse is going to be carrying, the Gemara said, either a person or even a bird, where according to Ben Meseira, there is no chiva, there's no malacha there, because Chai Noises Atzmai, and indeed it is aligned with Reb Nassan, who holds as well that a creature sitting on something else is not considered to be a load. Chai Noises Atzmai. Says the Gemara, but this horse being sold to the non-Jew, perhaps we're speaking about selling it to a Persian, who's considered to be tied up kafas. Now when he sits on this horse, he's considered to be like a master, like a load. So how can that be allowed? Even according to Reb Nassan, that shouldn't be allowed. Again, v'hani parsei, these Persians, the commander kefisi dami, who are regarded as tied up. V'amar Rabbi Yochanan. Nevertheless, Rabbi Yochanan tells us, Ben Meseira, who allows selling a horse to any type of non-Jew, even a Persian. Reb Nassan, Amar David Echad. So they are following the same line of reasoning. Ben Meseira is aligned with Reb Nassan, who holds Chai Noises Atzmai. But how can you apply that to a Persian? Says the Gemara, it's by choice. When the Persian conducts himself with heaviness and is all finicky, Hasam Ramas Rucho Denakatlu. They're being gripped by haughtiness, but certainly they have the full ability to run, to walk. They're not considered to be tied up, and therefore certainly the formula of Chaynosis Atzmai applies to them. It only doesn't apply to somebody who's actually tied up. These people are not actually tied up. Says the Gemara, I'll prove it to you. The Ahu Paradashcha, this Persian official, the Rasach Malki Iluvei, so the king got mad at him, and as a result he took off and ran, V'roit, Tlosa Parsi Bekari. He ran 3 parsois by foot. So apparently he has the ability full well to run if he chooses to do so. Therefore, technically speaking, they do not fall into the category of something tied up, and we apply the concept of Chaynosis Atzmai even to a Persian. So in summary, we learned the concept of Chaynosis Atzmai, a living thing, lifts himself, carries himself somewhat, and is not regarded as a masoi when it comes to Hoitzah Shabbos. We have machlekes. According to the Rabbanon, this applies strictly to an Adam, to a person. And as Taisus points out, not to a small baby, so it's merely to an Adam. However, a baby v'chai v'oif, and certainly anything which is tied up, will not have this concept applied to it. According to Reb Nosson, this concept applies not only to a person, but also to a baby v'chai v'oif. But not if these things are tied up. In that case, they don't have the ability to lighten themselves, to lift themselves. They are regarded as an ordinary standard load, and if one carries them on Shabbos, he has done Haitzah. Continues the Gemara, Es ha-meis b'mita chayev. The Mishnah tells us if one carries out a mace, and a mita is chayev, v'chen kazayis min ha-meis. This is in accordance with the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that even a malacha which is not of a constructive nature is a malacha she'ein tzricha legufa. It's not needed for its own purpose, its own sake. He's merely removing tumah. He's ridding himself of something unwanted and undesirable. That is considered to be a malacha, and he's chayev. Reb Shimon, however, disagrees. Reb Shimon says, in this case, he would be pater, because is there a malacha she'ein tzricha legufa? It's not needed for its own sake. It's not achieving a higher purpose. It's not a constructive malacha. Says the Gemara, Omar Rabba, Bar Chana, Omar Rav Yochanan, Ve'Omar Rav Yosef, Omar Reb Shimon ben Lakish. Pater Hay Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon exempted, he patered even after moitzi as a mace lekover, even if one should carry out the mace for the purpose of taking for burial, that too is not considered to be a proper malacha according to Reb Shimon. Let's take a look at Rashi inside who explains this. Rashi up on the first line, beginning with the words after moitzi as a mace lekover, where the purpose here is not only to rid oneself of the tumah, to remove the tumah, but there is a constructive purpose as well. The mace here is going to have a benefit. The object, so to speak, is going to benefit from this act of carrying. Even in this case, as the Gemara of Shimon exempts, he says it's still considered to be Eina Tzricha L'Gufa, because we look at the person. The person does not have any constructive goal, purpose. He's not personally benefiting from this Haitzah, and therefore he is pater. Says Rashi, V'loi Tema, don't think. Loi pater, Ela b'manicha l'chutz. Don't think that Reb Shimon only exempts, only is pater in a case where he's simply taking the mace outside to leave him outside. In which case, in tzorech, Loi l'gufa shel moitzi, there's no benefit for the person. Loi l'gufa shel haitzah, nor for the object. That in that case, there is no benefit at all, not on the personal side, not on the side of the on account of the chayfetz itself. The chiddush is no. Even in this case where there is benefit going to be derived for the mace itself, it is the tzorech, the object that is being carried out. Nevertheless, Reb Shimon says it's pater, because what determines the status of this malacha, of this ma'aser itzah? It is the personal benefit. We look at the person doing it. Is he deriving any benefit? Is it considered to be something beneficial for him? Then he's chayiv. Otherwise, he's pater. So the chiddush here is, even if he's being moitzi the mace lekover to bury it, it is still considered to be eina tzricha l'gufa, because the person carrying it does not derive any personal benefit from this ma'aser itzah. Amar Rava, umaydir Reb Shimon. However, Reb Shimon would agree in the following two cases that we consider it to be a malach. For instance, b'mar lachbar boy, he carries out a shovel, in order to dig with it. So he's going to have personal benefit from it. The Sefer Torah Likris, but he carries out a Sefer Torah to read from it. The Chayev. Why? So a Pshita, of course. So what's the Chiddush here? If he's going to have personal benefit from it, why would you even consider this to be a Melacha she'ena tzrich l'gufa? Pshita, of course. Dihi ha-nami Melacha she'ena tzrich l'gufa hi. If you would propose, theoretically, that this as well is regarded as Ein Tzrich L'Gufa and is Pater, then you find nothing that is Tzrich L'Gufa. Ela Malacha She'Tzrich L'Gufa, the Rav Shimon, Heicha Mishkachasla. If these cases as well are considered to be not of constructive nature, then what is? What is, according to Rav Shimon, a Malacha She'Tzrich L'Gufa? So what is the Chiddush here? Why is Rav need to teach us this Chiddush here, that when he carries the shovel or the Sefer Torah, even Rav Shimon would agree that he's chayiv? Of course. Says the Gemara, not so fast. Perhaps I would say, perhaps according to Rav Shimon, we only treat it as a malacha shetzrich l'gufa if there's a double benefit here. Both the person doing the malacha and the object itself will benefit from this malacha. He has something from it. L'gufa, the object has something from it. Kigai, for instance, mar lasisle tas v'lachbar. Why is he carrying out the shovel? To repair it, to place a tas, is a plate of metal on its tip, to repair it. She's taking it out for repairs, v'lachbar, and also to dig with it. So there's a double benefit here. The chayfetz has something from it, and the person has something from it. Or in the case of the Sefer Torah lahagia, to edit it, to repair it. V'likros boy, and then to read from it. So there's a double benefit here. The person has a benefit. The chayfetz, the object, will benefit from it. Perhaps only in that case do we treat it as a malacha shetzrich l'gufa. Kamash malan. Therefore, Rava teaches us that's not the case. We don't need it to be for that extent. We don't need to be providing benefit for the person and for the object. Rather, it is the person who determines the status. If it is going to aid and benefit the person, that is enough and sufficient, and it is regarded as a malacha shetzrich l'gufa. So once again, according to Reb Shimon, a malacha she'ena tzrich l'gufa is not considered to be a malachas machshavas and he's pater. But what determines? It is the person that determines. If he has personal benefit from it, we consider it to be a constructive malacha and he's chayiv. The fact that the object, for instance, has benefit, that is not sufficient. We need that the person should have benefit, and only then do we regard it as a malacha shetzrich l'gufa. Continues the Gemara, who shichva? There was this corpse, this mace. That person, the Ava B'derukras, who was present in this town, Derukras, Shara Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak la'afuke l'karmelis. So Rashi says he was, the mace was in a unpleasant situation, unpleasant location. It was a degrading situation. It was b'bizayin, either in the sun or b'dleiken or fire. So they needed to change its locations. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak allowed them to remove the mace and take it out to a karmelis, which is not a rishus rabim or rishus hayachid, it is a rishus rabbanim. Amalei Rav Yochanan Achva. So Rav Yochanan challenged him. Yochanan was the brother Achva the Marbrei the Ravana. He challenged the Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. He says, how could you allow one to carry out a mace from rishus hayachid to a karmelis? Come on to Reb Shimon? Are you following Shitas Reb Shimon, who holds that carrying out a mace is not considered to be a true malacha because it's ein tzrich l'gufa? Eima the pater Reb Shimon b'chiv chatas. Reb Shimon only exempts from a chatas. He says it's not a malacha deraisa. Isur d'rabbanan me'ika. Certainly, they said d'rabbanan. So how can you allow this l'chatchila? Reb Shimon says a malacha she'en tzrich l'gufa is pater, meaning he doesn't need to bring a carbon, but it's also a d'rabbanan. Amalei. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak responded, Holaikim, this is a lashon of a swearing of a shvur. The Eilas Beyat, you yourself are going to go there and carry out this mace. Vafilu Rav Yehuda Shari. I allowed, even in the case where Rav Yehuda would allow, meaning Rav Yehuda who holds that a melacha she'ena tzrich l'gufa is indeed a melacha. My ruling followed even Rav Yehuda's most stringent approach. I wasn't following Rav Shimon's approach. Did I then say that one can carry the mace from Rishus Yachid to Rishus Rabim, which is a Hitzah min HaTorah? Karmelis kamina. I was simply speaking about a karmelis to allow transfer from a Yishus Hayachah to a Karmelis, which is only a Yishus Rabbanon. Why? Even according to Rabbi Yehuda, who considers carrying a mace from one Yishus to the other as a bona fide malacha, as a malacha d'oraisa, because he holds that a malacha she'en shichel gufa is considered to be a malacha, even according to him, I allowed merely to a Karmelis. Gadol kvod habriyos. Human dignity is great. It's so big. It's held in such high esteem. Shadoyches loisa Torah has the ability to push away, to do away with a loisa saying the Torah. What type of loisa are we speaking about? Rashi says the law of loisasor. Torah tells us to not to stray from the words of the scholars of Chachamim. So this is the basis for the Sur and the Rabbanon. So what he meant to say was that I allowed, on account of kavod habriyos, to protect the dignity of this mace, who was mutal bebizayin, was lying in bizayin, in a fire, or in bachama under the sun. So I allowed a Issa D'Rabbanan to be pushed away. I allowed him to be carried from a merely to a Karmelis, which is only Issa D'Rabbanan, on account of kavod habriyos. Therefore, Nachman Yitzchak said it's unrelated to the discussion of Malacha Shein Tzrichol Gufa between Machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and Shimon. I was not even according to Rabbi Yehuda, even though Malacha Shein Tzrichol Gufa is a Malacha. I simply allowed it to be carried from Shazayach to a Karmelis on account of kavod habriyos. Now what about this? So Muktzah, Rashi says they would put something on it, a kikar, loaf of bread, or a tinaik. This was a method allowed to carry a mace in these circumstances. Continues the Gemara. Tanan Asam. So we learned in a Mishnah in Negoim, HaToilish Simoni Tuma. So if one has a nega, now there are various simonim, signs of tumah, of impurity in the nega. For instance, 2 white hairs which are growing in the nega, or a michya. Michya is a small piece of naturally colored flesh which is present in this nega, this white blotch which is tamei. So these are examples of 2 types of simoni tumah, which due to the presence of these things, the nega is tamei. Says the Mishnah, we know that the pasuk says he shomer b'nega tzaras. Rashi brings this is the lav, where the Torah tells a person, be careful, don't remove the simoni tuma from your nega. You must keep it as is. So if a person is toilish simoni tuma, says the Mishnah, toilish simoni tuma, if one removes the white hair in his nega, if he takes a michya, which is the naturally colored looking flesh, and he's koiva michya, he burns it. By doing so, he removes the status of the tumah from the michya, and he removes the status of tumah from his nega. Oiver b'loisase. He's over this lav where the Torah prohibits one from removing the simon tumah from his nega. Says the Gemara, Itmar, we learned, achas mishtayim chayiv. What if one has 2 white hair in his nega, and he removes one of those 2 hair? Chayiv. He is chayiv because the only way the hair is metame is if there are 2 there. So if he removes one of 2, he is removing the simon tumah, and therefore he's chayiv. What about if there are 3? There are 3 white hair. Achas misholish. So he removes only one of those 3, and there are still 2 remaining. Now 2 are sufficient to endow this nega with tumah. So what is the halacha there? Rav Nachman Amar chayev. In this case as well, he's chayev. Rav Sheshes Amar patur. He didn't do anything. The nega is still tameh. Rav Nachman Amar chayev. Why? Ahani ma'asav. Because he accomplished something. What did he accomplish? So by removing number 1 of 3, what's going to happen? Now he brought it closer to tahara. Because if the next one will be removed, tumah will disappear. So he brought it a step closer to tahara. By removing number 1 of 3, he is enabling the nega to become tar when the next one will be removed. So he brought it a step closer, and that is sufficient to make him liable, to make him chayav. Rav Sheshes Amar patur. We look at the current situation. Hashta miyas ha'isel tumah. Now, at this point in time, hashta miyas ha'isel tumah. Certainly their tumah is still present. He didn't do anything. He didn't accomplish anything. Amar Sheshis, Mana Minula. Where do I find my concept? The Snan, we learned in our Mishnah. The Snan, as we learned, Chen Kazayis Min Ameis, Kazayis Min Avela Chayla. Mishnah says, if one carries out a Kazayis of a mace, a Kazayis Min Avela, he's Chayev, because he got rid of the Tumah. Apparently, Chatzi Zayis, if he merely carries out only a half of a Zayis, of the mace or the Nevela, he's Pater. He didn't do anything. V'atanya, but we learned in another brisa, Chatzi Zayis Chayiv. If one should carry out only a half a Zayis, he is Chayiv. So we seem to have a contradiction between the brisa, which says Chayiv even on a half a Zayis, and the diuk of our Mishnah, which seems to say that he's Pater. So how are we going to reconcile this contradiction? My love, apparently, Hadasani Chayiv, the brisa which says Chayiv even on a half, we're speaking about a case where the apik chatzizayis mikazayis. When there was a kazayis present, there was an olive volume of the nevela present. When he removed a half, took it outside, he removed the tumah. Because at this point, it's only a half a zayis, which is not sufficient to be matami. So you accomplished something. Therefore, it is considered to be a significant act of Eitzah and Yischayev. So that's the pshat in the brisa. V'had is not potter. However, from our Mishnah, where we imply that he's potter by carrying out only half a zayis. Apparently we're speaking about the apik, chatzi zayis, mikazayis merza. When there was 1.5 kazayis there, more than necessary, and he only carried out a half, leaving a full zayis behind. He didn't do anything. He didn't accomplish anything. So although he brought it closer to tahara, because he removed the first of the 3 half of kazayisim here, there was 1.5, he removed a half. So he brought it closer. He brought the process one step closer to tahara. We look at the present moment, there's no accomplishment, therefore he's potter. So this is a source, Rav Shesh's Shita, we focus on the present. For Rav Nachman will respond, Idi v'di chayiv. In both cases, he will be chayiv. Meaning, whether he actually did something, or he brought it a step closer, he will be chayiv. Meaning, let's say there was a zayis, and he took out a half. By doing so, he diminished the shear, is chayiv. If there was 1.5 and he removed a half, he brought it one step closer. At this point in time, even if just a little bit, just a minute amount will be removed, it would diminish the shear. In this case as well, he's chayiv, because he brought it to that point. By removing that half of kazayis from the 1.5, he brought it very close to tahara. At this point, only a minute amount is necessary to remove to be mitar. Therefore, according to Rav Nachman, in both cases, it's chayiv. But it's not potter. However, the halacha on the Mishnah, which seems to imply that he's potter, is speaking about the apik chatzi zayis. He makes gadol. He carried out a half a zayis from a large mace. So there was a large amount of tumah there. He didn't bring it a step closer. He just took out a half a zayis. There was still so much more remaining. So much more needs to be taken out to minimize to remove the shear, to remove the tumah. Therefore, it's not regarded as though he accomplished anything. I'm only speaking about a case where he actually brought it very close to tahara. For instance, in the case where we have the 3 hair, he ripped out 1 hair, leaving only 2 behind. At this point, he brought it very close to tahara because all we need is to remove the next hair. Or in a case where he had 1.5 zayis of tumah, and he took out a half, leaving only 1 behind. At this point, all he needs to do is take 1 little bit, and he accomplishes. So he brought it so close. But when you have a large amount of tumah there, and he only takes out a half of a zayis, he didn't do anything, he didn't accomplish anything, and certainly he's potter. So in summary, if a person should carry out a half a zayis of tumah, so Rav Nachman says, well, if he took the half a zayis from the pre-existing kazayis, he diminished the shear, and he's chayiv, he accomplished something. Rav Nachman says as well, that if there was a kazayis umechza, 1.5, and he took out a half, he brought it so close to tahara, and therefore he accomplished something, he's chayiv. If it is mimeis gadol, he's potter. Rav Sheshis maintains the only way he's chayiv if there was a kazayis there, and now by taking out that half a zayis, he removed the shear of tumah. Only in that case he's chayiv, but in the other cases he's potter because we look at the present moment. If he accomplished something at the present moment, he's chayiv. But the fact that he brought it closer to eventual tahara, that is not sufficient to be mechayiv. Continues the Mishnah, if one uses his nails to trim his other nails, or trims them using his teeth, or uses his hands to trim his hair, v'chein sfamai, or his mustache, v'chein skamai, his beard, v'chein a gedelis, a woman who braids her hair on Shabbos, v'chein a kechelis, or applies eye paint, v'chein a pekeses, layers her hair in a specific fashion. Reb Lezer Machayev, in all these cases, Reb Lezer says they are considered to be a true malacha deiraisa, and he is chayiv v'chatas. V'chachamim, they say no, this is not regarded as malachas deiraisa, merely they are asam d'rabbanan mishum shvus. Shvus means meant to rest, refrain. So they are isuri d'rabbanan. Says the Gemara, Amar Reb Lezer. Let's go back to the beginning of our Mishnah. If one trims his nails or his hair using his hands, according to the Chachamim, it's not considered to be the customary way of doing it. It's not the ordinary way, the derech of doing it, and therefore it's not considered to be a malacha d'oraisa. Reb Lezer maintains no. Apparently, he can still achieve proper results, and therefore it's considered to be a true malacha. Says the Gemara, Omer Reb Lezer, machlokes biyad. So this discussion is only strictly because he uses hands. Avo bekli, but if a person should use a kli, a utensil, to trim his nails or his hair, divrei hakol chayiv, all agree that he's chayiv because it's considered to be a teilod, a derivative of the malacha of goizes. Goizes means shearing the wool off the sheep. Here too, he's trimming something off the person. It's considered to be a malacha deiraisa if he uses a kli. Says the Pshita, of course. Zu b'zu. The Mishnah specifically speaking about using his nails to trim his other nails. Apparently, if he would use a kli, it would be considered to be a malacha according to all shittas. So what's the chiddush? Says the Gemara, Ma'od Tema, perhaps I would think, Rabbanan v'kli nami patri. Even when using a kli according to Rabbanan, he is pater. V'hadeh tani zu b'zu. Why does the Mishnah specifically describe him as using his nails? The Mishnah is trying to inform us the extent of Reb Lezer's opinion, that even when he doesn't use a kli, it's still considered to be a malacha. But that's not to say that if he would use a kli according to Chachamim, it's a malacha. Therefore, the Gemara needs to inform us, no, that if he would use a kli, that is regarded as a bona fide malacha, is a talad of goizes, and according to all shittas, he would be chay v'chatas. Continues the Gemara, V'amar Reb Lezer, machlokes la'atzmai. This discussion is only if he trims his own nails, his own hair. In that case, Reb Lezer will tell us that even if he uses his hands, it's considered to be a malacha because he can achieve proper results. But if he attempts to do it to his friend, divya kol pater. Even Reb Lezer agrees it's not a malacha because he can't achieve proper results. He can't maneuver his hands properly to achieve proper results. It's not considered to be a proper malacha. Says once again, pshita, of course. It's obvious. It's a part of Tanan. The Mishnah specifically is describing it as Siparnav. He's trimming his own nails. Apparently, if he would be trimming somebody else's nails, all agree it's not a malacha. Says the perhaps I would think, Reb Lezer would maintain even when he's doing it for somebody else, it's considered to be a proper malacha. Why then does the Mishnah state Siparnav, which implied that he's doing his own nails, to inform me the extent of Rabbanan's chiddush, that even in that case, they don't regard it as a malacha. But this is not to say that according to Reb Lezer, should he decide to do it l'chaveroi, and is any different? Kamash Malan. Therefore, the Gemara teaches us no, that Reb Lezer is only mechayev if he does it on his own. But if he does it l'chaveroi, even according to Reb Lezer, it's not a malacha. Continues the Gemara, v'chein sa'aroi. Tana, what is the shear of the malacha of shearing one's hair, of trimming one's hair? How many hair? Hanoitel maloi piazug chayiv. If one trims maloi piazug, a shear of hair, which fills the piazug, the mouth, the tip of the scissors, is chayiv. So according to the Rabbanan, when you use the kli, according to Reb Lezer, even using his hands, v'kama maloi piazug, how much is that? Amravida shtein, 2 hair. V'atanya, but if we take a look at that same brisa, the brisa continues and says ulokarcha shtein. The brisa says that lekarcha, meaning the isser of balding oneself, shaving one's hair, as an expression of mourning. How much hair is necessary for that isser? Shtein, 2 hair. So apparently, this shear of 2 only applies to the isser of karcha, but not to the previously stated malacha of Shabbos. But it's one brisa. The brisa begins by saying, "Hanoitem moed piazug chayiv," And continues, L'karcha shtayim. So apparently this shtayim is only applied L'karcha, not to the former halacha of Shabbos. Ema says more read V'chein L'karcha shtayim. That indeed the shtayim goes back on the first halacha as well, that not only for karcha but also for Shabbos, V'chein L'karcha shtayim. So the shtayim is applied to both, to Shabbos and to karcha. We found this in the Brisa as well. If one shears that amount of hair, is chayiv. How much is there? Shtayim, 2 hair. So this is Tanakama who holds the malacha of trimming hair only applies to a minimum of 2 hair. Rabbi Lezer Omer, achas. Even 1 is sufficient to be considered a malacha. Umoidim chacham Rabbi Lezer. Chacham will concede to Rabbi Lezer in the following case. So if one is picking white hair from within his black hair, in that case, even if he does only 1 hair, if he picks out only 1 white hair, he is chayiv. Why? Because that is considered to be a melacha chashuva. That's considered to be something significant, because he's particular, even about 1 hair, even about 1 white hair. He wants to look young. So in that case, all agree that is sufficient shear for malach. Continues the Gemara. You meant to know that this thing, even during ordinary weekdays, is asur. It's asur for a man to pick out white hair. A man is not meant to wear a garment of an isha. He's not meant to involve himself in beautifying himself. That is considered to be a practice of women. Tanya Reb Shimon Omer. See, Peiren Shapirish Ruba, if a person has a nail which has become mostly detached from his body, the tzitzin, so these are these little loose strands of flesh around his nail, these cuticles. The tzitzin Shapirish Ruban, that they have also come apart, detached from the person. So if most of the tziparin has come apart, come detached from the person, and most of this strand of flesh was pierced from the person, then biyad mutter, a person may remove them using his hands. B'kli chayev chatas. If he uses a utensil, it's chayev chatas. It's a malacha. Says in Gemara, how can you present such a wide spectrum, such a wide extreme? Mika midi b'kli chayev chatas. Is there such a thing that doing something with a kli involves a chayev chatas? Is a malacha deraisa? And you allow him to use his hand even l'chatchila? Generally, the Chachamim would make a gzera, would not allow him using his hands, lest he come do and it's a deraisa using a kli. So how can you say on the one hand using a kli is a malacha deraisa and using his hands is mutal l'chatchila? Says Mahachi Kama, this is what he meant to say. Pirshu ruban. So if most of them became detached, biyad mutter, he can use his hands l'chatchila. B'kli Patur aval asur. So indeed, using a kli does not involve malacha deraisa. It's asur d'rabbanan, but certainly it's patur from mechatas. So that explains things. So if a kli is d'rabbanan, they allowed using his hands. Loi pirshu ruban. However, if the nail or these strands of flesh were not mostly detached from the body, biyad patur aval asur. In that case, it can involve a malacha deraisa. If he uses his hands, it's asur d'rabbanan. Patur aval asur. B'kli chayev chatas. If he should use a kli in this case, it's considered to be a malacha of goizes, and it's chayev chatas. But in any case, if they've come apart, they're detached from the body, ruban mostly detached, in this case, he may use his hands. It is mutal chatchil. Omar v'yida halach k'Reb Shimon Lazar. Indeed, that is the halacha. Omar Rabba B'cham Rav Yochanan. This allowance is only v'hu shepirshu klapi mal. This allowance to pull off these strands of flesh, it's only if they've become detached, klapi mala, upward towards the body. They cause him pain. In that case, Chacham allowed him to remove these strands using his hands. And as the Farshim say that, likewise regarding the nail, if it's become mostly detached from the body and it is causing him tsar, he's allowed to remove it using his hands. So in summary, what if one trims his nails or trims his hair using a kli? All agree that there's a chiyav chatas. Now what is the shear of trimming hair? at least 2 hair, or in the case of 1 white hair from amongst black ones, even 1 is sufficient for a malacha for chiv chatas. What if he uses his hands? If he uses his hands trimming his own nails or hair, according to Blazer, it is a chiv chatas. According to Chavim, it is only a Seder Rabbanon. What happens if he is trimming his friends' hair or nails using his own hands? According to all Shittas, he is pater, and apparently the Mepharshim say this applies not only to trimming nails, but also to trimming his friends' hair. Okay, time for a brief chazara of today's daf. We began with the Mishnah, which told us that if one should carry out oichlin less than a shear in a kli, not only is he pater for the oichlin, he's pater for the kli as well, because the kli is tafel. It is secondary to the content, and it is not significant. It is not reckoned with. The Brisa told us if he carries a oichel kishir in a kli, he's chayiv on the oichlin, but he's not chayiv on the kli, unless he specifically needs the kli out there. He is tzarech. In that case, he's chayiv not only on the food, but on the container as well. We learned the concept of chay neshes atzmai. A living thing lifts itself, it lightens itself. It's not considered to be a standard load. According to Rabbanan, this applies only to a person. According to Rab Nassan, to a behem, a chayiv wife as well, all agree that if it is kafas tied up, it's considered to be a load. We learned that if there is a kazayis of tumah, and he removes half of the zayis, by doing so he diminishes the shear, all agree that he's chayiv. It's considered to be a hitzah chashuva. He accomplished something. What if there was a kazayis and a half, and he only removed a half of zayis? According to Rav Nachman, in this case as well, he's chayiv because he brought the process closer to tahara. All you need now is to remove just a little bit, and to accomplish tahara. According to Rav Sheshes, at the present moment, he hasn't accomplished anything because he left the kazayis behind. He's pater. We learned about Machlokes to Rav Lezer and Rabbanon. If a person trims his nails or his hair using his hands, according to Rav Lezer, it's a malacha. According to Chum, he's pater. It's only Issa Rabbanon. All agree if he uses a kli, it's considered to be a malacha. And all agree that if he does it l'chaver to his friend, even Rav Lezer agrees that using his hands to do that for his friend is not considered to be a malacha. It's only an Issa Rabbanon.
What we're going to do today, Vincent, we're going to change tack a little bit from yesterday, and I think we're going to become a little bit more general, right? To talk about the concept perhaps of prayer, and the reason behind prayer, and why we pray 3 times a day. My mother-in-law always says that we pray 3 times a day because that way we can get out looking after the kids, which is relatively true, I think, actually. You know, you pray in the morning when the kids have to be got out of bed and get off to school, and you know, you'd love to help, but hey, you gotta go and pray, right? And then in the afternoon, you know, you're supposed to sort of like pick up the kids, bring them back from school, and of course you'd love to do that, but you have to go and pray. And in the evening, you gotta give them a bath and read them a story, put them into bed, and of course you'd love to do that too, but you know, what can you do? You have to go pray. But I don't think that's the only reason, even though that does seem to be a relatively practical dimension to all of this prayer business. But let's try to work it out. Interesting enough, the Rambam Maimonides says like this, that we pray 3 times a day, and there are in contradistinction to what my mother-in-law says, Maimonides says that there are 3 rather difficult moments in the day, the rather inconvenient times to have to pray. So in the morning, I mean, everybody knows that, you know, a person would prefer to stay in bed for an extra hour, I imagine, than to get up and go pray. But that's what we have to go and do in the middle of the afternoon. You know, a person's got to go and pray, but we're normally pretty busy. And come evening time, a person just wants to come home and he wants to, you know, sit down and relax a little bit and, you know, have maybe a deep and meaningful conversation with a 6-pack or something. And he's got to go out and got to go pray again. And the Rambam Maimonides explains that what are we doing? We are showing God that we're sacrificing a little bit of our personal, personal comfort in order to show God that we want to be together with Him, that we want to pray to Him. And that's why those times are the times that have been chosen. Does God need our prayers? I mean, God doesn't need anything by definition, right? God has no need for our prayers, so why are we praying? So the Maharal, the great Maharal from Prague, who lived about 400 years ago, explains that one of the most basic fundamental dimensions of prayer is the fact that we need God. Right? The fact that we have to pray and the fact that we ask God to give us things that, as a rule, God is the only person who's able to give us the kind of things that we're asking for, is an indication of our need for God. And therefore it's reinforcing inside of us each time we pray, it's reinforcing inside of us the idea that we have to build up this relationship with God, that we have to recognize that God is there. And that's one of the reasons why we pray on such a regular basis. During the week, we pray 3 times a day. On Shabbat, we pray 4 times a day. On Yom Kippur, we actually add another prayer in, so that 5 times. And it's consistent, which means that we're praying the whole time. We're praying every day. We're normally praying the same prayers every day. So, for example, what we prayed this morning was pretty much what we prayed yesterday and pretty much what we're going to pray tomorrow. When we come to pray the afternoon service, it's what we prayed yesterday and what we're going to pray tomorrow. So the question over here is, why is that? So in the olden days, the concept of prayer was something it was very personal, actually. In the olden days, we're going back now into the time of the first temple. So we're going back, 2,500 plus years ago. And we've got a temple, we've got an ability to communicate with God in a way that will express my own personal, connection with God. And therefore there wasn't very much formalized prayer in those days. In those days a person said whatever just came out of his heart, that's what he would say. Interestingly enough, in the words of the sages, the Amidah, which is considered to be the most focal part of the prayer services, the silent prayer is considered. It's called Avodah Shebalev. Avodah Shebalev means the worship of the heart, right? Things that come out of your heart, the things that you're able to transfer over to God. That's your personal dimension. As the temple era, the first temple era, came to an end, the only reason that the first temple was destroyed because the Jewish people weren't on the right spiritual standards that they'd been on before. They weren't on the same levels that they'd been on. The levels were beginning to lessen, they were beginning to ebb, and subsequently our connection with God ebbed as well. And if that was the case, people were no longer praying in the way that they had been praying beforehand. So along came the men of the Great Assembly, and they said, here, what we're going to do is like this. Really, what they're saying was like this: you've made a mistake. If you imagine that prayer is something that is voluntary, and you can choose to pray whenever you want to pray, it doesn't work like that. God wants us to pray 3 times a day. And up until now, you've been able to use whatever language you want to use in order to pray to God. But that's not going to work out anymore because people weren't on the spiritual levels to feel that connected that they wanted to pray. And therefore, the men of the Great Assembly said, look, what we're going to do is like this. We're going to introduce the text. The text is going to incorporate everything that you could possibly want if you would understand the text properly. And then you're able to now concentrate on saying the words in the way that they're supposed to be said, rather than having to come up with your own words on the way. And that's where the concept of formalized prayer came from, and that's where the first prayer services, which bear pretty much a resemblance to the kind of prayer services that we have today, that's where they all originated from, which means that we have now the prayers have been given to us. What we have to do is that we have to work on our intention as we say the prayers, our concentration as we say the prayers, and that's something which of course is very difficult to do, but at least we don't have to worry about coming up with our own text as well to be able to communicate with God. Why do we pray 3 times a day? Well, we pray 3 times a day because that connects into the 3 Avot, the 3 patriarchs, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It says that Shacharit, which is a morning service, corresponds to Abraham, the afternoon service corresponds to Isaac, and the evening service corresponds to Jacob. They introduced the concepts of praying at those times. There's an interesting disagreement amongst various authorities about whether Abraham prayed 3 times a day, and it was the spiritual dimensions that were introduced by Isaac into Mincha, into the afternoon service, and by Jacob into the evening service, or whether Abraham only prayed in the morning, and then Isaac came along and he added more from the morning service. He added the afternoon service as well, and then later on, Jacob came and added the evening service. The rabbis learn all of these things from various verses that are used to describe the way that the forefathers prayed to God. So we pray 3 times a day to correspond to those 3 times that the Avot, that the forefathers prayed to God as well. The idea of prayer is something which is really very, very fundamental. It really is. The idea of being able to connect together with God. The idea of not having to worry about what you're going to say is both a help and in some cases a hindrance as well. Because when a person wants to pray for something of his own, a person's got his own personal, unique thing that he needs right now. So it would seem, according to the prayers that have been introduced by the men of the Great Assembly, it would seem that we've got where am I supposed to put these in? If I've got my own personal prayers, at what point are they supposed to be put into my prayers, to the prayers that the men of the Great Assembly introduced? So there are moments within inside of prayer where it's possible to be able to add in your own personal supplications, your own personal prayer. You can ask God for anything. Right? That's something which is also rather important to know. Which means that the idea of praying to God is, it's not just that you're praying to God for spiritual dimensions. It's not just a spiritual aspect to the prayers, but there's a pretty physical aspect to the prayers as well. So within inside of the Amidah, which is the silent prayer, we ask God to give us health, and we ask God to give us wealth, together with other spiritual dimensions that we ask God for as well, that He should rebuild the temple, and He should bring the Davidic dynasty, and the Mashiach should come, and all of those things that we would expect to be in there. But the practical dimensions are also there as well. And if a person has a particular desire, you can add it in to the Amidah. You can add it in at various stop points on the way. You can add really whatever you want into the Amidah. However, you should know that the correct way of going about praying to God is to accept the fact that sometimes if God feels that what you want is not going to be beneficial, then you should rely on God's opinion, and maybe God doesn't want you to have something. Don't expect that simply because you're praying to Him that He should give you whatever you want. There's a very beautiful story they tell. There was a very influential personality from a couple of generations ago called Rav Yosef Shalom Kahneman. He was the Rosh Hashiva of the Ponevezh Yeshiva in Bnei Brak. He actually established it. And somebody once came to him and said to him, Rebbe, I don't understand, you teach us that when we pray, God listens to our prayers. He says, I'm praying and I'm praying and I'm praying, and God's not listening. And the Ponevezh Rav turned around and he says, yeah, He is listening. He just said no. Which means it's a mistake to imagine that just because you've taken time off from your busy schedule in order to pray to God, that God has to give you what it is that you want to have. We have to work on the premise that if God's not coughing up for something, then it means that it's not beneficial for my needs right now. Or maybe God would like us to pray a little bit more, to be even a little bit more subjugated to His will before He gives us what it is that we want. Everybody here knows just as well as I do that sometimes you want something. Bless you. Sometimes you want something and you get it, and at the end, whatever it was that you wanted, either it didn't give you any real happiness at all, or sometimes even worse. It caused things to be worse than they were. You thought that you desperately wanted something, but in the end, when you got it, it wasn't. It never did what you imagined that it was going to do. The Chafetz Chaim, one of the greatest personalities He died just before the Second World War broke out. The Chafetz Chaim wrote that you should be careful what you pray for because you might get it. Which means that, we have all kinds of prayers for things that we want, but at the end of the day, are these things actually going to help us? Are they going to be beneficial for us? Are they going to propel us forwards in our pursuit of reaching, who we're supposed to become and reaching our potential? Well, it's a big question mark. It really is. Always tell over, they did a study of 10 people that won enormous amounts of money on the lottery. I imagine everybody over here, we've all dreamed from time to time about the possibility of winning the lottery and just coming into millions overnight, becoming multimillionaires. And they did a study. I mean, it wasn't a very deep study, but they came back a year later to find out what was going on with 10 people that had won enormous amounts of money, ranging from tens of millions of dollars up to one person who won over $100 million, which is a lot of money. Of course, the dollar's not what it used to be, but nevertheless, I'm sure we could probably still manage to subsist somehow with with a few tens of millions of dollars stashed away in the bank somewhere. And they came to find them a year later to find out what was going on. And what was fascinating was that 9 out of 10 of them, their lives were in tatters. First of all, out of the 9, not one of them was still left together with his original partner. Right? Some of them had lost all of their money in ridiculous business schemes. One of them was in jail. Their lives were in absolute tatters because they'd come into huge amounts of money. A dream, right? A dream that everybody dreams about, just waking up and being rich. And they'd come into huge amounts of money, but they had no idea how to live a life that was going to be a healthy way of living with all of that money. The 10th person, interestingly enough, out of the 9 out of the 10, their lives were completely shattered. But the 10th person was doing okay, and the reason was because he'd been a wealthy person beforehand. Which means it's true he became enormously more wealthy than he was, but at least he'd had some kind of an exposure to what it means to have that kind of a blessing, and how to be able to live with it and what to be able to do with it. Which means that you can ask God for anything, you really can. You want a red Ferrari, you can pop that into your prayers, and hopefully God will cough up a red Ferrari for you. I don't know whether he's going to give you the wherewithal to pay for the insurance. That I don't know. Maybe you'll have to do that bit on your own. But nevertheless, if you want a red Ferrari, you can ask for a red Ferrari. If you want anything else, you can ask for anything else, whatever it is. But just that we should approach prayer from the vantage point of realizing that if we're praying to God that he should give us these things, then we should be leaving the ultimate decision about whether we should have them or not should be left up to God. Right? Let God himself decide whether it's right for us to have the things that we're looking for and the things that we're asking for. What's within the prayer? So perhaps the most central prayer that exists inside of the Jewish prayers has got to be the Shema. What is the Shema? The Shema, it comes out of verses from the Torah. There is actually a Torah obligation to recite the Shema at least once a day. We say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that we make a declaration that Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. What's the idea? When we say that Hashem is Echad, that Hashem is one, what we're saying, what we're declaring is that God is the only entity in the world, in our existence, that can be described as one. The rest of us, everything else in the world is comprised of bits and pieces and parts. Even every person sitting over here, there's all different dimensions to you. So there's your the bones, and there's the veins and the arteries and the skin and the personality, or for some people personalities, and it all clips together. When you put it all together, you end up with a person, right? Which means that even though there's only one of you, nevertheless, you're comprised of different pieces. However, God is Echad, God is one, and therefore, when we make this declaration that Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, it's something that we're saying which is absolutely fundamental to our belief system. That's why the Shema appears all over the place. It doesn't appear just inside of the regular prayer system that we've got. We recite it in the morning prayers, we recite it in the evening prayers, we recite it before we go to sleep at night, we recite it on the night before a Brit. It's something which is recited over and over and over again, and it is something which really defines our relationship with God. There is a very beautiful idea, the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. The opening words in the Code of Jewish Law are Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid, that I place God in front of me always, which seems to be a rather odd phrase to have, because the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, is a treatise of laws. It's telling us what we're supposed to do. It doesn't seem that there is a law contained inside of Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid, that I place God in front of me always. Some people, you may have paid attention, that you may have seen it when you go into, very often in different synagogues, at the front it's written very often where the Chazan is standing to recite the prayers, that will say the words over there just to remind him of who he's saying the words to. I once heard a very beautiful explanation, the idea of Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid. It's a verse that comes out of the book of Psalms, and yet the Code of Jewish Law of Yosef Cairo introduces the laws, the halachot are introduced with those words, because what's the idea? I think the idea, again, is something very beautiful, that if we place God in front of me always, then it doesn't really matter where I am. Everybody wants to be number one, right? Everybody wants to be the most important. But if God is number one, then at that point it means that I can move back a little bit. It doesn't matter where I am. I don't have to be number 2. I can be number 3 or number 30 or number 300. But the important thing is that if I place God in front of me, therefore I know that I need to do what it is that God wants me to do, and not the other way around. If I think I'm more important than God, then that means that I'm going to ask God to do what I want Him to do, and not the way that it's supposed to be. There's I saw once an interesting idea, the number 10, which is made up of the figures 1 and 0, which means if you place God in front of you, and if in your eyes you are nothing compared to God, so then you can become a number 10. A number 10 is a very significant number inside of Judaism. The number 10 is the idea of having reached spiritual heights and having reached a certain sense of completion, which means you can reach that kind of a height if you place God in front of you, and you know that God is there. You're the nothing, you're the 0 to God's number 1, and you can become a number 10. However, if you think you're more important than God, that means that you're putting yourself in front of God. God remains number 1, come what may, and we are nothing compared to God, which means that when you put a 0 in front of a number 1, all you've done is you've negated yourself. Which is, imagining that you're more important than God is not going to help a person understand and reach upwards in the spiritual realms to become who they need to become. So that's why the Shema is something very beautiful. The prayers that are recited inside of the Shema, the first paragraph of the Shema talks about our accepting upon ourselves the heavenly yoke, that we accept God as being our King. The second paragraph of the Shema talks about accepting the mitzvot. Interestingly enough, within the second paragraph of the Shema, it talks about the idea of if we do what we're supposed to do, then the rain will fall and the crops will grow. It's a very telling insight into our relationship with the world, is that it's going to be defined according to our relationship with God, which means if we do what God wants us to do, then the world, nature, will work in tandem together with us. It will work in the way that it's supposed to work, which is if we do what we're supposed to do, the rains will fall, the crops will grow, there'll be plenty for everybody to be able to eat, and it'll be good. And if Chalila, we don't do what we're supposed to do, then the rains won't fall on time, and the crops won't grow properly, and then at that point, everything is going to start going wrong. Which means that it's a very beautiful idea. It's an idea of understanding that nature is God's vehicle. Nature is God's method of being able to have us exist in the way that He wants us to exist, we can define whether there's going to be rain, whether there's not going to be rain, by us doing what we're supposed to do. I always remember, I can't remember, it was maybe 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, there'd been 3 years of very poor rainfall, winter rainfall. It doesn't rain very often over here in winter. Even the rain season is really normally only January and February, and you need a lot of rain in order to be able to top up the reservoirs and to top up the Kinneret and to make sure that there's enough water over here to keep us going through the very, very dry summer months. And there'd been 3 very poor winters with very, very small amounts of rainfall, and the Kinneret was reaching an all-time low. And the meteorologists got up and they said that they were expecting a wet winter, but they said that there was no way that it was possible for the rain to be able to replenish the Kinneret after all the years of drought, and therefore it was going to be a year of rain, but they didn't really think there was going to be very much, certainly not enough rain. And that year it rained and rained and rained. It was unbelievable the amount of rain that fell. And in one rainy season, the Kinneret topped itself up. Most incredible thing, a miraculous occurrence without any doubt whatsoever. It was such an incredible thing that after Purim, which is around March time, I took my children, we took a day off from school, and we drove up to Tiberias to take a look at the Kinneret, because it was incredible. Within the dry years that had been, trees had started growing on where the water used to be on the banks of the Kinneret, and the Kinneret had moved all the way forwards, and there were docking stations where the boats would come that were completely exposed, and we went to look, and we saw, you saw bits of trees sticking up out of the water, and the water had come all the way back up to the top where it had been before the years of drought, which means that God can do whatever he wants. He really can. But God is waiting for us to put our 2 cents into this as well in order to make these things happen. Which means that if we want nature to produce, then we've got to recognize that the produce that nature is giving us comes from God. That is one of the great rabbis once mentioned a very beautiful phrase. He said, "There's nothing natural about nature," which means nature belongs to God. Everything within nature is just a manifestation of God down here in the physical world. What we have to do is we have to learn how to look at that and to recognize it and to see it and to appreciate it. Not always an easy thing to do. The 3rd paragraph of the Shema contains the paragraph that talks about the mitzvah of tzitzit, of wearing tzitzit, of wearing a piece of clothing that's got strings attached at 4 corners. Any 4-cornered garment needs to have tzitzit attached to them, these strings attached to them. And it also talks about the exodus from Egypt, coming out of Egypt, which is something which is really like the focal part of who we are, is going to be measured from the exodus from Egypt and standing at Har Sinai 50 days later, and receiving the Torah from God. That really is a defining moment within inside the Jewish nation. That's where we define who it is, who we are, and where our identity comes from, which makes the Shema an incredibly important dimension of prayer. And that's why, interestingly enough, inside of the morning prayers, it's found right in the middle. We build ourselves up, we pray a whole series of prayers at the beginning, which are called Psukei de Zimra, which are a series of chapters of the Psalms that we recite in order to get us into the mindset that we should be ready to begin to recite the Shema. Just as an aside, the words Psukei de Zimra, if anybody here speaks Hebrew, so you'll know that they mean song. They're chapters, verses of song. Psukim are verses, and Zimra are songs. Right, on Shabbat we sing Zmirot. A Zemer is a song. However, the sages point out that the word can also come from the word Zamor. Lizmor means to prune. What does it mean to prune something when you want to make a tree, when you want to get your garden ready for the winter? So you prune out the trees, you take down the greenery, you cut back some of the branches. It looks like you're killing the tree, but really what you're doing is that you're making sure that the tree is going to be able to rejuvenate properly when the spring begins. Bless you. Bless you. When the spring begins, that you're going to be able to, that the tree is going to be able to rejuvenate quickly and healthily. Right? So too say the sages that the function of the Pesukei Zimra, all of these chapters that we recite at the beginning before we begin to recite the Shema, are there to prune away the distractions from inside of ourselves. You know, there's a lot of things that distract us, especially when it comes to doing spiritual things, especially when it comes to doing prayer. We are very easily distracted. The idea of reciting these psalms is to try to focus us on what it is that we're supposed to be doing. They tell over a story about a chassid who once came to the Kotzker Rebbe. There was a very, very famous rabbi. He lived in the town of Kotsk. He was very famous for his very sharp, very pithy insights. And one of his chassidim, one of his disciples, came to him and said to him, Rebbe, he says, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. He says, when I pray, I always think about my business. No, I'm sorry, I'm getting this wrong. He says to him, Rebbe, he says, help me pray better. So the Rebbe Mikotsk says to him, if you want to pray better, you should think about prayer whilst you're doing business. So the chassid says to him, wait a minute, and then, how can I do that? He says, well, why not? He says, you think about your business when you're praying, so you should do this when you do your business, you should think about prayer. It's true, right? I don't know. We start to pray, our minds go floating off into all different kinds of directions, all different kinds of places, and we have to learn how to concentrate. I have a brother who is a doctor. He's a surgeon, and he says that you can't, when you're doing surgery, you can't afford to be distracted. You can't afford to be thinking about whatever it is, the football scores, or to be thinking about what's going to be for dinner whilst you're going through this very complicated surgery. Because if you do, then the person, it's not going to work out well. It's not going to be good, right? If we could only learn that prayer is as important as that surgery is, if we could only learn to relate to prayer in that kind of a way, then the quality of our prayer would improve dramatically, and perhaps even more importantly, our desire to pray would be much more pronounced than it is right now. For an awful lot of people, the idea of prayer is something which doesn't sit very comfortably with them. It's not an easy thing to do. And if we would only understand what the power of prayer really is, then we would be able to understand a little bit of why it is that we should want to pray. And if we do that, then half the battle has been won already, because once you want to do something, then you'll end up trying to do it properly, I would hope, anyway. No. Yes. Did anyone have any questions so far?
Yeah, I something that I thought of when you were talking about Sukkot Zimra and the origins and how they're verses of songs, and that those lead up to everything else. It's funny because I'm in the process of learning to speak and read Hebrew, and when I read Sukkot Zimra, you can tell by the structure, like the commas, the distance between commas, or a comma and a period, is like music that verses of in English. So it simplifies the learning of Hebrew, because this is a song. There's something to this other than just reading it, and it really helps. It helps tremendously. It's true. It's interesting. The punctuation is like the tempo, right? Which allows you to have a greater appreciation
that there is no doubt, the Tehillim, for example, Psalms, they are absolutely beautiful. They really are. They are majestic. They are lyrical. They're astonishing. And yet, when you read them in English, sometimes they sound, when you translate something into a different